We're very excited to welcome Troy Hartman to our Breakfast Club this morning. Troy's name is practically synonymous with aerial stuntman. Troy has performed more grand scale aerial stunts than anyone, period. He is well known in television and film. He hosted a very successful program on MTV where he was actually the star as well, performing most of the stunts. You may remember him from the famous Goose commercial that Pepsi did in the 1998 Super Bowl. And he is the first winner of the X Games sky surfing competition. He was world champion the first time, and not the only time. So he's also an inventor, he's an aeronautical engineer, and he was also in the Air Force Academy. So without further ado, we welcome Troy Hartman, and I can't wait to hear what he's going to tell us.
Good. You needed to kind of pump me up there because I can tell I'm among greats. Looking at the website and just talking to a few of you when I came in here, there's obviously been some pretty grand scale stories told, so hopefully I can be as entertaining with some of my stories. I realized that probably most everybody in the room prior to today or getting the website announcement had no clue who I was. And any that do know who I am, probably the biggest question I ever get is, how did you get into this? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, this thing's kind of bouncing back and forth. Does it look silly? It does in my vision, but it's okay. You can't see it. All right. So I'll just give kind of got to bend it a little bit there. There we go. So I'm going to sort of briefly talk about my history, how I got to where I am now, and then I'm going to talk about some of the experiences I've had, and scary and exciting.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Sorry, technical difficulty.
What was the first using
Can
one of these?
everyone hear? Yeah.
Okay, is that good? I'm going to grab my water too. So and my parents are here too, and I'm glad they made it down, and hopefully they'll maybe become members and come back, because my dad is a private pilot and had a lot of influence on where I am today growing up. But I grew up in, I guess you call it a settlement called Tom's Place. Many are probably familiar. It's between Mammoth and Bishop. Yep, somebody said, oh, it's not much more than a general store and a few houses scattered amongst the rocks out there. And of course, this was in the early 70s.
Good fishing.
Good fishing, great fishing. So I did grow up fishing. And yeah, as a kid, growing up there, you know, not much to do. Well, there was plenty to do, but there were not other kids, I should say. There wasn't a lot of outside influence. We didn't really have a TV. We didn't have any of that stuff. You know, we were really in the sticks. My sister was fortunate enough to have a few girlfriends that lived in the neighborhood that were roughly her age, but until I was about 10, I didn't have any, there were no guys there, no boys there that were my age. So, you know, I had to entertain myself, and combined with the fact that I have this just hugely crazy imagination that I just always had, you know, that was what my life was about for the first 10 years, was just dreaming up these ideas and just kind of, you know, I was a kid, honestly, that, and my parents remember this so well, we'd go to a function, a swimming function or a thing, and all the other kids would be running around playing, and I'd be off by myself, you know, making the noises and spinning around, and I was in some battle of my own, and I was turning every object into some sort of weapon or enemy or something like that. So I was that weird kid. There's no doubt I was that weird kid. Even my wife today, I make those weird noises and play those games with the kids, and she goes, "Oh God," she goes, "I just see how you were as a kid. You were that. We didn't want to be around you when we were your age." So anyway, you know, that was just who I was. I was just this really imaginative, creative kid, and my dad being a pilot, that was, you know, we used to fly down here. They've had a condominium or a home in Indio ever since I can remember. I think last night they said 1976 was when they bought their first place down here. So we've been flying down since the 70s, going into Bermuda Dunes, and So that was a good thing for me, being introduced to flying, being in the airplane all the time. That sort of allowed me to channel that creative energy in that direction of aviation. Of course, there wasn't much I could do with it at a young age other than building model airplanes, which I did a lot of. But, you know, that creative mind that I had and sort of a curiosity that I could never really fulfill. I always needed to see what else could be done. I never was satisfied. As great as it also was a bit of a detriment to me as well, because I started out building the model airplanes and building different versions of model airplanes and seeing what they could tolerate flying and seeing what variations. Through maybe 2 or 3 years of iterations of doing these things, it came to a point where I had designed my own handheld rocket launcher that had it actually had an explosive warhead on the end of it, and I'd have my buddies try to shoot down the model airplane, with this thing. And, I mean, we got ourselves in trouble with it. The culmination of that, when I was 14, was, my buddies could never hit the airplane, so they fired this thing into our neighbor's truck and blew it up. A little bit of an elaboration, but we did blow up my neighbor's truck growing up. And that was a moment of, whoa, okay, you're pushing it, and that was a big ordeal. I sort of, I straightened myself out the last 3 years of high school, and I had a couple of moments where I realized if I keep doing this stuff, I'm going to go down the wrong path. So I focused on the Air Force Academy. I knew that was my best chance of getting to fly, and I made it in. I did everything I needed to make it into the Air Force Academy. Did really well, loved it. That was a great experience. Made it to my senior year, and I was flying all the time. Does anybody here graduate from the Air Force Academy? I have this feeling there, 1 or 2. Okay, well I was in the 94th Aero Squadron as an instructor, which is gliders. It's the preliminary training program. So I taught in the gliders. I flew down at the Aero Club and the T-41s. I was flying every day. It was my passion. It was all I wanted to do. And I was on the right track. And once again, the same creativity, I guess we can call it, reared its ugly head. And what I wanted to do was figure out what these airplanes could do. I got tired of the straight and level or the maneuvers or do these emergency. And of course, I was like, well, why can't I fly this low, or why can't I loop a Cessna? Why can't I? And that was my nature. I just wanted to see what were the limitations. I really wanted to push it, and I got really into the low flying under bridges and through canyons and all this other nonsense. And one day it caught up with me. I got too low. I hit something. I took the wheel off the airplane and had to come back to base with a 2-wheeled airplane. And that ended my Air Force time. Unfortunately, it was my last year at the Academy. And among a couple other little things I had been in trouble for, I was out. That was a really tough time for myself, for my parents. I thought, the world's coming to an end. I'm no longer going to be a pilot. What's the value? I said, well, I got to finish my degree in aeronautical engineering. So I dove back I went to Cal Poly. Fortunately, I was able to transfer into Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And although I was finishing my degree, I was kind of, that first 6 months out of the academy, I was just in this dark place of what am I doing? What does it all matter anymore? I'm not going to be a pilot. It was really a dark place for me. So what do you do when you're in that place and you're 21 years old? You go skydiving. What do you have to lose, right? And so I did. I took up skydiving. Just had a couple of buddies who had said, let's go do this. And I went out and did a skydive. And as a pilot, I had friends in the Air Force who were skydivers. And they went away. I said, no way, absolutely no way. That just sounds crazy. It scared the heck out of me. It's not something I ever would have done on my own. But again, it was a different time after that. And I had some friends say, let's go do this. What the heck, let's go do it. And I got really into it. I fell in love with it. It turned out that it was something I really did enjoy and I understood. And so at that same time, this was 92, there was this guy in France who had started sky surfing. He'd started doing this thing, jumping out of a plane with a board and doing this crazy stuff. And I saw that, and of course anybody else in the skydiving world said, well, that's that French guy, he's crazy, that's Black Death. And I said, but there's someone doing it. I mean, if someone's doing it, then that means I could do that too. And of course, I mentioned it to my parents, and they just thought I was so lost at that time in my life. You know, I'm supposed to be finishing college, and now I'm off, you know, putting a board on my feet. So, trying to make a long story short, that was kind of how I made my way into this sky surfing, which was sort of where the beginning of my career really was. I got into the sky surfing. I wasn't the first world champion, but I was, that's the only thing you got wrong. I went at it fast and furious, and actually doing my first board jump was an experience in itself because no one would allow it. It was one of those things that some guy in France was doing, but you know, anybody here in the States, no, you can't do that, that's too dangerous. And so I had to actually build a board myself out of wood and sneak it onto a DC-3 at a drop zone up in Lodi where, you know, it's a DC-3. There's so many people getting on a DC-3 who's going to notice. And I literally went up there with this homemade board, got on the airplane 5 minutes before everybody else, went to the very front, tucked the board underneath the seat, and no one saw until the end when we were all scrambling to get ready to go, and I started putting this board on my feet. And the guys around me, the tandem mat, like, what are you doing? Of course, they're nervous and they're dealing with, so they're not going to say anything. So anyway, it worked out. I did this jump with the board. I got out there. I stood up on the thing. Well, not after, I mean, after tumbling 20 times. But I got up on the thing and I said, whoa, you know, I'm standing in free fall. That was a big moment for me. That was huge. That was a very big defining moment for me. I was now doing something that I had been told over and over and over again, you cannot do it. You cannot do that. Don't even do that. You cannot do it. And for me, I said, that's it. I'm doing something that I've been told you cannot do, and I'm going to pursue this because it was an eye-opener. And I fell in love with the sport, competed for 4 years, ended up winning the X Games in '97. It took me 4 years to get to that gold medal, so I had to work really hard. I wasn't a natural. I got in early, is what it was. Not really a natural athlete. I'm a decent athlete, but I got in early, and so I was able to get to the top early on in the sport. I lost my partner in a skydiving accident, my cameraman, that year. I quit sky surfing, and it was around the time when Pepsi was looking to do this big campaign, and this might be where anybody would have first seen my work was in a commercial for Pepsi, and it ended up being on the 1998 Super Bowl. And I have a video I'm actually going to show in a second here. Everybody can see it and remember. But that was my big door opportunity where everything aligned. I had just won the X Games. Pepsi was looking for the face of this big Super Bowl commercial, doing something really wild and crazy, and I just was there. It was just perfect collision of opportunity and preparation. That opened the door into the stunt world, which I'm going to now get into and talk about some of that stuff, but I have a video that will kind of segue us into that. I'm Troy Hartman, and welcome to the best of Senseless Axomania, the show that recreates all the stunts from your favorite music videos. Are you guys ready for me or what?
This guy needs a wheelbarrow to carry his balls.
See ya. These guys are trying to kill me.
was a stunt that I've been wanting to do for a long, long time. Every skydiver knows that they attempted this in a James Bond movie and failed. So just to be out there and actually have a crack at this thing was a dream come true. So here's what I've got to do. I'm in the silver airplane. I've got to get out and chase down this white airplane that's headed straight for the ground in a nosedive, catch up to it, climb in, and then pull out of the dive before it's too late.
How about that landing? Oh, you can stop it now. Yeah, I know, after all that, and then that landing, to top it off. That's my favorite stunt. It's not the hardest, it's not the scariest, but it's the neatest. And you know, Robert Scott is the pilot there, and I don't know if you can see it on this video real well, but he's got a lot of panic in his face. When we were looking to do the stunt, of course, the pilot played the key role. I want to make sure I kind of bent out again. It's okay. Does it sound okay? Well, it sounds like you want to hold it. Let me put it down here. Is it? It's good? Okay. Yeah, so preparation of a stunt was one of the things I was going to talk about. And this is a perfect stunt to talk about that because there's so many elements going on. So we came up with the idea. You know, most of these stunts actually weren't my idea. I have to say that we had a team of producers, and that was the way it worked on the show. I had a wish list at the very beginning when the show started. Again, they found me through the Super Bowl commercial. Hey, would you like to do this show where you do all these crazy stunts? I said, sure. You know, they said, give us a wish list. Well, the wish list got us through season 1. And you know, I would do three stunts per show, and that was per week. And we would do 6 per season, so I do 18 stunts a season. But we were doing three stunts per weekly show, so it was a crazy schedule for me. I was doing 3 stunts a week, so it was really hard to focus on the stunt at hand. Sometimes when I knew that the stunt I was really fearing the most was on Tuesday or whatever, I had something else coming up. So it was an intense show. Again, this was actually a stunt that I was really looking forward to. We make it sound like it's death-defying and, you know, he has no parachute. Well, I didn't have the hard job there. The pilot had the hard job. All I had to do was get to this airplane that was hopefully flying straight down, and if it didn't work, I could peel off, open my parachute, and be done. Robert Scott, he's a banner tow pilot. Maybe somebody knows him. He's been banner towing in the Southern California area for a long time. We found him. I don't know, the producers called so many pilots saying, hey, would you be willing to do this thing where we're going to put this mini parachute on the plane and you're going to dive straight at the ground and get to terminal velocity? And they didn't get many takers. And this guy said, I'll do it, because he was, and it made sense. He tows banners, and so he had this understanding of having this high drag device on the back of the plane and what he would have to deal with. It scared the crap out of him. It took us 4 or 5 attempts. We didn't do it on the first time. And we had problems with the drogue, and you know, so what would happen is we have to have this drogue, and we have to get this, you know, first of all, we have to get this drogue released clean away from the airplane, so it doesn't, when it, you know, gets out there, it doesn't go around the tail and immediately, you know, tear the airplane apart and kill the pilot. So we had to essentially have somebody get in the airplane with him with the drogue in a bag, and jump out of the plane and control the drogue. You know, to get below the tail of the plane, just that far, and then, you know, that skydiver could leave, kind of take the bag with them, or the bag was still attached or whatever, but the drogue would release. And of course, it was trial and error to find the drogue size that would put the airplane into, oh, I'm sorry, there you go, I gotta explain what a drogue is. A drogue is essentially a small parachute. It's what you'll see on the back of a drag racer. It's what tandems, you see a tandem, they have it stabilizes them. It's a stabilizing device. It's used on, I guess, military test aircraft. That's how they slow these planes down. So it's a mini parachute. Essentially, it's a parachute, really. So we had to try all these different size drogues out and different cut the holes a different way so the thing wouldn't oscillate, or it wouldn't, this stunt we did 4 or 5 times, because the first time the drogue immediately broke. The plane went into a dive, and out came the drogue, and we went, and the next thing we knew, the thing just snapped. And the scary part about that for Robert, for the pilot, is as soon as that drogue snaps, the airplane now goes from probably 100 miles per hour is kind of the vertical speed we were going for, 100 miles an hour. It would just immediately start to just pick up speed and go in the red line, because he's just suspended vertical, and he had to pull out of the dive right away. He was fine with that. We got that worked out. He was ready for the drogue snapping. And then, we had to deal with too slow of a drogue. Next time, we adjusted it. I went out of the plane, and there's the airplane up there. We're all trying to get as big as we, okay, see ya. That's the end of that. So it was drogue sizing, it was the drogue braking, it was then drogue releasing. Drogue releasing was a big one. He actually had an instance on one of these where he couldn't get the drogue released. He actually landed the airplane. We don't have it on video. It was a scary moment. I was under canopy. None of us saw it. They were videoing us or dealing with the skydivers, so no one has it on video, but apparently he had to land with the drogue, which these airplanes, these banner tilt planes, are powered in such a way, I guess, that it was capable of landing, but it was a very hard landing, and he kind of came down and just planted it on the runway. Fast forward a couple of years anyway, they wanted to Stunt Junkies is the name of the show, Discovery. They wanted to do the stunt again, and so the first thing we did, there's this guy, Robert Scott, who did this, and somebody contacted him and he said, no way in hell. I know, he said, I won't do that again. So the producer said, well, who else can do this? And Joe Jennings, who's the cameraman, he's a longtime partner of mine, he does all the aerial filming. He said, well, Troy, maybe you want to do it. I said, well, I'm not a banner tilt pilot. He goes, yeah, but you're a pilot, you do all this stuff, maybe you'd want to try it. Okay. I said, yeah, we did it once before, I would like to try it. So, as exciting as it was to be the skydiver and do this, it was really exciting to be a pilot. And I had the opportunity, and we went out and we tested drogues to see how, one time we actually had a drogue almost not release, the guy that went up in the plane with me, and we threw the drogue out together to try to see it, test the speed and the size and just stay in the plane and then release it. That first attempt, he actually couldn't get it to release. And he's, and so we're both, we're at in the airplane we were using, a 182, when the drogue didn't release, we were at a 45. That was as far back as I could, full power, bring it all the way back, pitch it all the way as much as I could get was about a 45-degree angle with that drogue still attached. And we knew that was the best we were going to get. So we were going to have to jump out. Anyway, we were ready to jump out, and he gave it one last tug, and he got the thing released. It turned out it was, the angle of the cable, little things, that you may not think about, but just happened to be the way the angle of the cable kind of went around one of the corners. It just made the tug force on the cutaway that much more difficult. And the first 3 or 4 times, he couldn't get the thing cut away. So I've now done it as the pilot probably 10 times, and we've got it really well worked out. The reason I'm telling this story is because we're actually now in preparation. We're in network talks at this exact moment where we're taking this stunt to the next level, where I'm flying the airplane for my good friend who's doing the transfer, and he's not wearing a parachute at all. So I'd say it's a grand scale stunt. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. They asked me if I would do it. I wouldn't do it. I'm not going to jump out of an airplane without a parachute on my back. He's going to do it, and he's qualified to do it. I think the stunt's going to go off great. It's something we're looking at doing this summer. We have lots of preparation. Again, I've done this 10 times, and the drogue thing is figured out, the flying vertical thing is figured out. Lots of funny stories have come out of this whole stunt, but that's kind of my favorite. Some of the other stunts, you saw the parachute on fire in there. That's a favorite. I think I heard a few little oohs and ahs. That was a great one. The trick with that stunt, again, you do these things and you just don't know. The little things, you're just not sure what's going to happen. What problems you're going to run into. And on that particular stunt, it turned out it was evaporation, and we had to find the right chemical. We had to find the right mixture of whatever it was. It's actually become kind of a proprietary mix that the pyrotechnics guy that we hired said, hey, we want to light a parachute on fire. What would you have to soak it in? And they did all this testing in the backyard with big fans and what the evaporation rate would be of all these different chemicals. And in the end, it was some crazy mix of gasoline, kerosene, and some sort of gel. And then we had to put a bunch of cotton baffles inside the canopy so that it would soak up and hold the kerosene. That was actually one of the simplest, but that's one of the biggest stunts people remember is the parachute on fire. It's just so visually amazing, but not the scariest. No close call there. The closest call I've had, and a lot of people want to ask me about this one, and I have a video of it. I guess it would be the next video, or you could let it play. You could let it play straight off of what you ended on. This one I'm not proud of, and it's actually a video that I don't even have up on the internet or anything, because this was my biggest mistake as a stuntman, and it was me allowing the pressure of the chute to dictate my actions above safety. I was young. I was in my 20s. This was probably my fifth shoot day of the show. We were gaining momentum. We were doing these great things. There was a lot of talk about the show, and the idea was land a parachute on a train. Shouldn't have been that big of a deal. We had pretty much everything well planned. We had to choreograph though. What the trick to this stunt this is what made it so tricky was I'm jumping from an ultralight, and we had a camera car. We had an area where the perfect camera positions were, where they wanted this train to come through this really scenic section of orange groves or something, and that's where all the cameras were set up. So they really wanted me to land right in this perfect little spot where the train would be. So we had to time it. We had to do 3 or 4 test jumps where I would get out of the ultralight, they'd cue the train would go to a certain speed, the camera truck would pick up at a certain speed, and we'd see where we'd all converge. And I'd be under parachute, and we'd see if, I'd come down and land out in the field, but we'd see how's the timing on this. Okay, that was no good. It was too far behind, too far ahead, whatever. We did it 3 or 4 times, and we got the timing down. We got all the timing down for everybody. It was the last chance we had. The sun was setting, and of course somebody had to put the bug in my ear that it was costing $15,000 a day for the train. Well, the train's $15,000 a day, and with everything else, this is a $60,000 a day. We got to get this. That's the first time that I almost let that take me out. This is where I learned a big lesson: was who cares? As a stuntman, who cares? I don't care what you're spending. My life is what's important here, and doing this safely is what's important. Well, I didn't prioritize that. And you'll see here what happened was the timing was all wrong, and I went for it.
Moving known as the train line.
Check it out. I'm standing on the edge of that ultralight, getting ready to go. That's where my nerves will really be going because it'll be time. But the nerves are pretty high right now. The Day in Sync's video for Bye 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 premiered on MTV. The producers have censored us for watching. That same day, I get a phone call asking if I can land my parachute on top of a speeding train. I really didn't give it much thought. I just said yes. A week later, here I was at 2,000 feet over the same train NSYNC used in their video, wondering what the hell I was doing. family are always asking me why I do this stuff. Truth is, cameras or no cameras, this is what I live for, and I can't wait to see what they throw at me next.
I got a call from my dad that evening, and it was very to the point. You need to really think about what you're doing. So that was. I've had some close calls. For certain, I've had a lot of close calls. That was obviously pilot error, and that was. I just had angels on my shoulders that day to give me another chance. So I changed my attitude about doing stunts, and I've had a pretty good career. I did another 2 or 3 years, well, 2 years of that show. We went pretty fast and furious. We did a lot of really great stuff, broke some world records, did some stunts that have never been recreated. And it was great. I learned a lot about the business, but the truth of the matter is I'm not really an at the core stuntman. I think I'm more of an engineer at the core. And I just ended up in this world, and I did well with the stunts because I understood, at least in the aerial environment, I had a strong understanding of the mechanics and the physics, and I knew what was possible and what wasn't possible. I think that's what got me through. I got invited by a number of different stunt groups. They work in groups, and they want to bring you into their group, and they say, hey, you want to work in stunt group X or whatever. But I wasn't really interested in that. So I turned down those opportunities. I actually, at the end of the 3rd season, I went to the producers. We were gearing up for season 4. I went to the producers. I said, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do it anymore. It's making me anxious. It's making me crabby. I'm losing sleep. I'm going to die. I just can't do this anymore. And they said, the producer actually pulled out a bottle of tequila and said, we were wondering when you were going to come to us, and you know what? We're glad you made it this far. They said we thought you were going to quit after season 1. And so I got out of the business, everything working and alive, and I'm very grateful for that. This was 20 years ago, 15 years ago. I was going to make that disclaimer before I put the video on the hair and all this other stuff. This was 20 years ago or something now. And I've sort of focused my efforts away from stunts. I still do them. I'm still going to do this big stunt for this guy with the no parachute. And I'll still do them, but I have to pick and choose which ones I feel are worthwhile and the risk versus payoff factor is right. But I've stepped more back into my engineering stuff. And one of the things I've gotten real into in the last 5 years is I've suddenly gotten involved in this jetpack race. That there's a few guys out there that are going after it. That's a whole story in itself, how I got involved in that. It was by accident, really. But I'm in it now, and I have a couple cool photos that I can actually show because anybody here that's a Wall Street Journal subscriber, in about a month, I guess they do a semi-annual publication that they send out, and they just came and interviewed me, and I've released my secrets of this jetpack that I've designed and tested, and I think it's going to be the most viable of the jetpacks that are out there now, because we've got anybody that's familiar, follow the whole jetpack thing. We've got the Martin jetpack, which is 2 ducted fans but 1 motor. I've always seen the flaw in that being it's 1 engine. Engines fail. I mean, pilots, we know that engines fail. And anytime you build an aircraft, you build it to be able to withstand an engine failure, and you have procedures for when you have an engine failure. And they say, oh, well, when the engine fails on this, we have a parachute, we have a ballistic parachute. Okay, that's great. What happens below 100 feet? And that's one question that none of these guys in the jetpack business, as it's become, suddenly there's this jetpack business that I've kind of become involved in. They can't answer that question. No one's been able to answer the question. Well, you just hope that the thing doesn't fail below 100 feet. That doesn't make sense to me as a pilot, as an engineer. It just doesn't sound right. So I've designed, and this was all secret stuff up until about 2 weeks ago. And how are we on time? We're doing really well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. You can, if you want to pop up. There's 2 photos on there. These are just a couple things. Again, this was top secret stuff until they came and interviewed me, and it's all going to be, there you go. Yeah, you can put that up there. So yeah, the jetpack, you can see the jet wing off in the corner there. I have a wing like Yves Rossi. We've all seen Yves Rossi doing his thing. That's another project that I'm very interested in. It's awesome. It's pushing the boundaries of aviation, and it's unbelievably cool. I just have never seen the practicality of Yves' jet wing other than for show. It's awesome. It's not even really good for air shows because he has to stay so high, but it's sure good for getting 10 million views on YouTube and attracting sponsors and all that other good stuff, which is great. I mean, I've just, this has been my focus again for probably, the jet wing for the last probably 8 years. I've been playing around with that, and then the jetpack for the last maybe 4 or 5, but this is what I'm doing now. And the jet wing is something I don't see ever having, again, I don't see any real value in it. It's something I'm doing because it's fun, but this jetpack, my thing on the jetpacks are, everybody talks about where's my effing jetpack, you know, we're supposed to have jetpacks by now. It's become this cult thing, and I've fallen into it. I think it's really pretty cool. But I differ from most of the other guys that are building the jetpack in that I don't believe it's going to be a mass transportation device. I don't believe it's going to be practical in any way. The Martin jetpack, I think, has some practical applications. I think they're going to have some problems with the engine failures. And then I don't know, probably a good number of people have seen this new jetpack designed by Taylor Nelson and the Australian. There's a video you should see that's really cool. They built a working jetpack that uses jet engines instead of rockets, and it can fly for about 10 minutes, which that's the big hurdle with jetpacks is the original Bell jetpack, the James Bond jetpack, can only fly for 30 seconds because it's rocket propelled. That's great. That's another air show thing, another exhibition thing, but how practical is that? So 10 minutes is all we're going to get realistically out of these jet propelled jetpacks because just fuel, the amount of fuel you can carry with it, you know, with one of these things. And so I never see it as being it's not going to be a mass transportation thing. I think, you know, when they interviewed me for the Wall Street Journal, he said, so, you know, why then? What's the point? And I said, well, what's the point of dirt bikes? You know, it's just off the cuff. What practical use do we have for dirt bikes? Really? Would the world stop operating if we didn't have dirt bikes? No, but there's a lot of people riding them, and there's a lot of competitions, and there's a lot of people using them recreationally, and a lot of these things are costing well into the tens of thousands of dollars. So why not a 10-minute jetpack that's really for recreational purposes only? Of course, the cost is such a factor. You know, these other companies want to charge $200,000. Well, a big part of my development of it is I'm going to keep this around $30,000. You know, and I figured out how to do it, and that's my big thing. And again, this is everything I spilled my guts to them. It's going to be about $30,000 for a jetpack that operates for 10 minutes, and if an engine fails, you're going to be able to land it just fine. The reason is there's 4 engines in there. There are 4 engines that combine their mass flow into one and evenly output through the output ports there. It's my proprietary part of the device. I call it the mass flow balancer. It's essentially taking the mass flow, which is about 350 pounds of thrust, out of 4 engines, and it's balancing it. And this has been a long process of figuring out how to make this work. There's a lot of fluid dynamics, thermodynamics. There's a lot of this stuff that I had to figure out. But I've made progress, and I've done a lot of testing, and I'm getting really close. And I know it's going to work. It's just a matter of time. I just need to keep doing little things to refine it. One engine fails, you're going to lose 1/4 of your thrust, and it's going to be symmetrical thrust. Whereas with, you know, this other jetpack that's out there, sure, you know, you still have half your thrust if one of these engines fails. One engine operating over here, I don't think you're going to do much with that. So it's symmetrical flow, and you're only losing 1/4 of it with one engine failure. Now, my whole theory is look at the numbers. You know, okay, the statistics of one of these engines failing, you know, the numbers are, yes, you'll have a failure because there's so many components. There's a computer, there's a fuel system, there's all these different things. Yes, one will fail. That's just inevitable. And I said, what are the numbers? I'd have to have a mathematician do the numbers for me. What are the chances of 2 engines failing in the same 30-second or 1-minute window where that's when you want to put it down? Probably not very high. It's kind of like a double parachute malfunction. It's just very rare. And that's what I'm banking on. I'm banking on the statistics of 2 engines failing at the same time when they're completely independent systems. That's the whole idea, all the way down to the throttle stick. It's not going to be one throttle stick splitting out. It's going to be, 4 you're controlling 4 with this device. It's all mechanical. It's not going to have any extra stuff. It's going to be all independent systems. So my belief and my hope is that in the next year to 2 years, we're going to see a lot of this. It's already been refined from here. This was version 2.0. I'm already on 3.0. But this is what it's going to look like, and this is roughly how it's going to operate, and that's kind of what I've dove into that's what I'm working on more than anything else right now. I don't know. Are we at that point where we get some questions? Because I'm sure there's some questions.
What about a drogue for a failure on that seat?
A what?
A drogue, an explosive drogue.
Oh, like a rocket propelled parachute. Well, that's exactly what they're using on the Martin and on what they call the JV9, the other one I described. It's the BRS. Is that what you're referring to, the BRS system? Yeah, that's what they're putting on there. That, I looked at the BRS website just to get some numbers, and they said tested down to 250 feet with an airplane. That makes sense. And I said I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Obviously, that airplane has airspeed, when they fire that, so that's going to help. I said I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. The best rocket-propelled parachute design, and it would be by BRS. I give them 100 feet at 0 airspeed, because you got to remember, with a jetpack, you're going to be hovering. You have no airspeed to help you out whatsoever. All you're going to depend on is the trajectory of that rocket. So I said I give them 100 feet, and I think that's being generous. I don't know. I'm always open to hearing people argue it, but I think 100 feet is generous to get something like that open. And again, I think below 100 feet, you're toast. I just can't see a parachute getting deployed below 100 feet, especially if you have no airspeed. But again, if somebody has an idea, I'm always looking at, well, prove me wrong.
What's altitude?
So, say again?
What's massive altitude?
It'll be the altitude, operating altitude, basically confined by the altitude that the engines can operate at. They can run up to 20,000 feet, but more than anything, it's going to be the fuel burn. The amount of time to get up to, that's 10 gallons right there, and that's another design. Actually, that's another thing I've designed. You can't see it in this picture, but these are 2 separate tanks. You can see there's a line right there. This lower quarter, or maybe even fifth, is a separate tank. The reason for that is if you have an engine failure and you lose a quarter of your thrust, well, or say you lose 2. I think I was thinking more along the lines of, what if you did lose 2? Well, the first thing you're going to want to do is get rid of any weight you don't need. And that's where all your weight is in the fuel tank. So that upper tank is 8 gallons or so, and the lower tanks are 2 gallons. Well, I said or maybe 1 gallon. I think it's more like 1.5 on each of those lower tanks. Because my thought is, look, if you have to land immediately, you only need 1.5 gallons of fuel. You don't need to be carrying the whole load if you have an emergency. So those upper tanks, if you lose a motor, it's manually operated at this point. I mean, obviously down the road, maybe you'd be automatic or whatever, but those get jettisoned, those get knocked off. And now you're operating on the 2 lower tanks, so you're immediately getting rid of 50, 60 pounds that you want to get rid of. You want to have the highest thrust to weight ratio possible if you have an engine failure. But yeah, to answer your question, it would be a matter of the time it takes. I can't imagine you're going to get to 10,000 feet and then have enough fuel to get back to, but as far as taking off out of an airfield that's at 8,000 feet, sure. These engines have that capability. Yeah, they can run up to, I would say probably 10,000 would be the max, would be the limit.
The question, you said 4 engines? Less than 100 pounds of thrust produced?
They're 90 each, yep.
You making those engines or buying them commercially?
Oh, repeat the question. Yes, he asked the engines, the 4 engines. He asked they're roughly about 90 pounds of thrust each. And am I making them or am I buying them? It's become more making them at this point because that's a big expense. There's a lot of drone the companies that they're drone engines. They're essentially unmanned aerial vehicle engines. That's really all they're used for. They're not model engines. And they're expensive. If you try to buy them from these manufacturers that are selling them to the military, they're about 15,000 a pop, 12,000 a pop. Well, right there, you're looking at about 50 grand just in the motors, you know. And so when I started looking at the project, I said the only way this is going to be viable is to design the whole thing from the ground up, cut out all that stuff in the middle, and that's been a big part of it, is figuring out the design. And actually, I actually sort of figured that out early on and learned how that can be done. I've got jet engine parts all over my garage. It's kind of a crazy mess. Yes.
Can you picture what kind of pilot training that you might have with this?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Oh, yeah, I gotta keep repeating the question. Yeah, the pilot training would be, you know, it starts kind of in the simplest form, like they've done it with the other jetpacks. You know, you're on a tether. You start out just literally, you know, a line that's got tension on it. Someone pulls tension for you, and you just see what the thing's going to do. And you see videos of these guys trying to learn on the old Bell jetpack, and they're just, you know, flying around the room. It's just, and then you put it on a pulley. That's actually really what you want, is you want it on a pulley, and they actually have these automatic tensioning reels now. So it would be an automatic tensioning reel, and on a track, probably just looks like just like this. This would be just it, you know, something like this, and then the guy just keeps on trying, because once you can hover it, that's really the trick. And then flying it would you know, be pretty simple. So yeah. Yes, sir.
Are you going for a speed record or altitude record?
Going for a speed or altitude record with the jetpack? At this point, I'm going for a make it work record. Yeah, I'm focusing on one thing at a time. I do know it. I actually have had such positive results in the testing. I know it's going to work now. So yeah, I am looking ahead to what kind of things can be done with it. Altitude, people ask about altitude a lot. That's the biggest question. So sure, first thing to do is, you know, calculate how much fuel you would need and how far you can go up and still be able to come back down and just go for it and do it.
Second thing is, remember our slogan, Go Mustangs?
Remember the slogan, what's that? Oh, Cal Poly, you're Cal Poly too. Go Mustangs.
Class of 69.
69, awesome. I was 94.
Getting back to your airplane transfer, it looked like you really slammed into that airplane trying to get into it. Did you injure yourself?
I don't, okay, sorry. No, I injured the airplane though. I had to buy him a new antenna. that was.
Hold on, the question was.
Oh, sorry, the question. It was, he asked, he said, it looked like it was a kind of a violent entry into the airplane, the plane transfer in that video. And did I hurt myself? And I said, no, but I hurt his airplane. And I did, I tore off the antenna. And the honest truth is, I'm a very adept sky surfer. I do a lot of wingsuit flying, but I'm actually just the basic belly to earth skydiving. I'm average. I didn't do a ton of that, and all of these disciplines are so different. And so, as much as I'm talented in some areas, I'm just a very, very average. We call it belly to earth skydiver. So my skill sets at that point of climbing into the plane and my control level, and there are others who could have done it much more smoothly. Let me put it that way. And they have. When I've flown the airplane doing the stunt, the guys who we've had doing the transfer, they've just made it look too easy. So, yes, sir.
What's the pilot weight limit for this?
Pilot weight limit on the jetpack?
Yes.
The engines now are 90 pounds of thrust each, and I with losses, I'm saying that you're going to get about 340 of that. And so I doing the math, taking out the 60 pounds of fuel, and I said about a 200 pound weight limit, but I have plans for a larger size where I lose 10 pounds. Basically it's a 10 pound heavier machine where every pound is, to me, important, so I don't want to make it too heavy. But for another 10 pounds, I've looked at how I can design it and have it take another 100 pounds.
But what's the weight limit for the pilot?
It'd be about 200 pounds. The pilot weight limit on this one
Yes.
would be about 200 pounds based on everything, the weight of the machine, the fuel, and those engines. But I haven't, to answer your question, the next one I'm working on, when this one is successful and I want to start, there is the next one that's a 10-pound heavier machine. It's a little bulkier. That one will be able to, I think, probably be more like 280-pound pilot weight limit. Yeah, so it really comes down to the size of the engines. You can go bigger and bigger and bigger. The only thing is it just starts to get bulkier. But in this size, about a 210-pound pilot.
Troy, do you test these yourself?
Yeah, I'll test this myself. You know, some things what I love about the jetpack is it's something that can be tested in a confined, controlled environment. Because most of the things I do in the past have always been, we're testing this at 10,000, 12,000 feet out of an airplane. And it's, you know, it's such a not, you know, controlled environment half the time. You have only a limited amount of time, whether I'm going up and throwing something out of the plane and seeing if it'll fly. This is great because I can set up a nice, controlled, indoor, weather-independent environment with all the and you're just doing little hops. You know, and you're wearing a fireproof suit. You got a lot of fire extinguishers. Believe me, I've had plenty of fires. My parents have been there. They've had to use the fire extinguisher, I believe, and some of the things they were with me. We were testing. And yeah, it's something that I'll test because I think it is. It's baby steps. It's baby steps.
The fire extinguisher was for the house.
Well, right. But it was there at the time.
Wait, one more question.
Yes.
Last question.
Yes. Okay.
I was just wondering, how's your wife taking all this?
That's a great question. Well, considering that she is also a base jumper, skydiver, and kind of, we met on a stunt job where I was rescuing her she was a hostage and I was so she takes it pretty well. Yeah, she's from the same cloth, I guess you should say. She's all about it. She thinks it's great.
But thanks so much, Troy, for coming. And if